Hey guys, good afternoon. It's a beautiful day out here. I'm just chilling, waiting for a pick up something right now, but I'm just gonna just wait around for a minute. So I want to talk about all of us as people when it comes to the idea of leadership and the idea of empathy. A few days ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, and it reminded me of a show, a documentary that talked about leadership and empathy, where there are aspects of leadership where empathy is a formula based on the environment and situation one is. When that individual talked about that, I thought about that. Being a leader, one has to work around the situation they're at or in and wonder, is empathy really something that is part of the leadership quality of an individual, and is it something part of our judgment? That is something a lot of leaders have to consider. But what made me think about this one is the perspective of ethics, something I enjoy talking about. The question I ask everyone, and I've asked this before, is your ethical value and your ethical consideration, does it have the perspective of empathy? Is empathy in your leadership decision part of your ultimate decision? Because that's an aspect that a lot of people are willing to talk about it, but they're not willing to act on it. I was watching the news just a few hours ago, where a person who had the quality of a leader by the perspective of other people, but the individual indirectly was inconsistent. He devalued people. He changed the ethical and the perspective of the situation because the narrative did not fit him. So he changed the narrative to fit his need, and it reflected in his lack of empathy for others. One of the things I've seen, and it's something that is taught when you study behavioral science, is that human empathy is a coordinated effect, and it creates either the strength that will unite a team, or the sledgehammer that will break the team in two and in other small pieces. That is why many people talk about ethics and empathy, but considering the situation is a valued effect. But as leaders, do we value empathy as part of our ethical leadership decisions? It doesn't matter if it's a decision based on human instinct or human idea of capacity of you know um, helping each other, uniting each other. Are those perspectives so important? But are we using those aspects to lead correctly? One of the things in leadership is the studies of history. One of the scenarios that I've been given years ago is a perspective of individual decisions, leadership decisions. When you make a decision based on the moral compass you're at that moment of time, you got to consider, is your ethical decision going to mandate the loss of a life or a saving of a life? Those are non effortless ideals, because you got to make choices sometimes, and sometimes the choices you make counters your own belief. Ethics and empathy is a correlated effect that a lot of people must consider. Today, when I see leaders today, those ideals of ethics and empathy are part of their decision making. But when they finally decide what path they're going to make or take, those two subjects are not even there. They talk about it, they think about it, but they don't make decisions on ethical or empathy grounds. Some people will say, well, you can't. In leadership, you can't have empathy or ethics in every consideration of a decision. The one thing I learned years ago from a individual, a friend of mine, said, when you decide about when you decide what ethics is about, then you'll know what to do. Ethically, you have to find the ground to balance your decision. When leaders are willing to judge others, but they're not willing to judge themselves, that idea of ethics goes out the door. But when you start deciding the fate of individuals, the fate of a certain group or certain people or certain situation, the idea of ethics has to come up. And within that parameters is the value of empathy. There's a reflection from the Romans in which they believe that we are able to still value empowering our soldiers to march to victory, but we have to cater to their empathy, their situation, and understanding. Because if you don't understand how to cater their empathy, how to cater themselves, how to care for their value, these men will never fight for you. Those are the perspective a lot of leaders think about. How can you balance ethics and empathy in your decision? Today, leaders have to make a decision. Are we going to create a solution that's ethical without devaluing anybody else or devaluing a group? And when you do so, are you corresponding those ethical decisions with empathy in mind? As hard as we think empathy is, and how hard ethics can be, today's leaders need to think about those values more than ever. I value an open conversation about ethical decisions and how ethics can correlate and coordinate with empathy to make decisions that can be rudimentary to the situation and distinctive to this operation or mission or job it's being tasked to do. So is it really fair or is it really hard to make decisions as leaders using empathy and ethics in your mindset of the decision itself? No matter what we believe, each of us are different leaders. For me, I have to make ethical decisions because I can't turn my back and don't remind myself that the ethical choices I made could hinder somebody's life, could strengthen somebody's focus, or indirectly make it worse. And within those perspectives, I have to also make decisions. How do we convey compassion and care and understanding, the focal of empathy, to better the lives of others, even those who serve with us or serve for us. So, what do you think? Is ethics and empathy a valued asset in our leadership role today, from corporate office to the squad level of a military? Everyone has a different opinion. I just gave you a part of my opinion. To me, ethics and empathy is a valued asset, and it can and should be used in many decision making. Not the only decision making tools, but a perspective that can be used to balance your decision to fit the situation you're in or you're at. If you have any questions or you think it's wrong or right, send me a response. But take care, stay safe, and be careful out there. Okay?